Hey, what is up, fam? It's Dr. Dale, and I'm excited to dive into chapter 2 of Diverse Medicine Building a Stronger and Healthier Nation with you today. So, first of all, if you haven't got a copy, please help me out. Go online, get you a copy. It's on Amazon.com. You can grab a copy there. If you like the book, please drop a review. It means a lot to us authors when we get reviews from people who read the book. So please do go grab your copy on Amazon.com. All right, that's the first thing. The second thing is if you want to stay up to date with the work we're doing around this topic, around mentoring the next generation, exposing the next generation to healthcare, and guiding them along that journey, join our email list, blackmenandwhitecoats.org/email. blackmenandwhitecoats.org/email. If you want to learn more about our Black Men and White Coats Youth Summit, see when we're coming to a city near you, check out bmwcevents.com, bmwcevents.com. All right. Now, so if you missed last week, just go check it out. It's on the website, blackmenandwhitecoats.org, and we covered chapter 1 last week. And also it's on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Check it out there as well. Again, please like them, subscribe, do all that stuff to kind of just show support, so that way I know that you guys are enjoying the content, and really also just so it helps these various platforms know that people like the content. So please do that for me and for us as an organization. So this week we're going to dive into chapter 2. Again, if you haven't got your copy of the book, please grab a copy, because I don't want you guys just to listen to what I'm saying and miss out on some great details that's actually in the book. I'm just giving you guys a high-level overview. However, the details in the book, the really good stuff, the meat, is actually in the pages of the book. So please support, and also please just learn. Grab a copy of the book. So let's dive into chapter 2. And chapter 2 is called Achieving Excellence, Not Just Equity. Achieving Excellence, Not Just Equity. Phenomenal chapter that, again, lays a solid foundation for the rest of the book and really gives a different understanding, a different idea as to why individuals like myself are so passionate about this idea of diversity in healthcare, right? That's what chapter 2 is really going to touch on here. So I start the chapter off by talking about a movie from the 1990s, The Sandlot. The Sandlot was a great film. I loved it. A lot of people in my generation really loved this film. And in it, essentially, the premise, the plot, what's going on is they're a group of kids. They love playing baseball. There's a new kid who moves into the neighborhood. The new kid wants to fit in. He wants to find a way to connect, and he wants to play sports, right? So he goes out. He's playing baseball with these guys. They lose their ball. He's like, "Don't worry, I've got a baseball." Runs to his house. He gets the baseball, brings it back out. Like, "Hey, Smalls, it's your ball. You're up to bat." He goes up there, winds up, boom, hits a home run. That's his first home run. Super excited. Everybody's cheering. "Yeah, Smalls, you did it." But you look at Smalls, and he's not that happy. They're like, "Why you hit a home run? Why aren't you happy?" He's like, "Hey, guys, you guys don't understand. That wasn't my ball, right? That wasn't my ball." And it turns out it was a stepfather's ball that was signed by the great legendary baseball player, Babe Ruth, right? So Smalls is like, "Oh, my goodness, we've got to get that ball back." So throughout the movie, they're trying to find ways to get the ball back from over the fence that is protected by the Beast. The Beast is this huge dog, and everybody's scared of the Beast. So you're like, how do we get over this fence? How do we get that ball without the Beast killing us, essentially? And at one point, finally, and this is what kind of stuck with me. At one point, the character of Victor DeMaria, I'm not sure if I said that right, but Victor DeMaria, he says, "We've been going about this all wrong. I blame myself." And what I write in the book is, this heartfelt admission reflects the genuine bonds of friendship forged among the boys and the shared responsibility for action. Their shared responsibility for action. And then go to talk about, referring to the scene, it reminds us that sometimes in pursuing our goals or resolving a challenge, no matter how much effort we've already put in, we must take a step back and evaluate our approach honestly. And that's where I'm at in this chapter. Taking a step back to evaluate our approach to promote diversity in the field of healthcare honestly. Before I move forward, let me take a moment to give flowers to those who have been doing work since before I was born. Give flowers to those who have been doing work after I was born, those who do work at my level, the younger ones. A lot of people who are in this space doing great, amazing work, and had they not been here, who knows what things would look like, right? So by no means am I trying to take away from the work that they've done. People have done phenomenal work. I think about some of my mentors and the amazing things that they've done, right? So people have done phenomenal work in the space. However, we're still, I believe, far from where we need to be, right? And because of that, we'll take a step back and say, have we been going about this the right way? And in certain situations, there's probably areas that we could have done better at, right? And those are the areas that I think that we need to be focusing on, right? Those areas that we can do better at as well. Not to say we should neglect the other areas. If what's working is what's working, let's keep going there. But at the same time, let's not let's not overlook opportunities to get to the results that we're trying to get to, right? So that's really important. That's how I start this chapter. Just saying, hey, okay, guys, if we're gonna talk about making healthcare better, we need to take a step back, and we really need to evaluate what we've been doing. Have we been doing it to the best of our abilities, etc. Right. So moving forward in the chapter, something that I say, in the chapter I say I'm going to state the obvious because sometimes it seems as though people just don't want to state this, but to me it's obvious. If you're in a position of power, why would you ever give that position of power up? If you're in a position of power, you're not just going to be like, hey, you can have my power. You got resources. Hey, you can have my resources. That's not the way this thing works. If you're in a position of power, most people, I would say, in positions of power will probably prefer to stay in those positions of power. Most people with a lot of good resources will probably prefer to keep those resources, right? So how do I get you to say, all right, you have power, give up some of your power. You have resources, give up some of your resources. How do you get somebody to really do that, right? That's tough. I talk about Booker T. Washington in the book. And Booker T. Washington, so my favorite book of all time, the Bible is actually more than one book, you say 66 books, but the Bible, right? My favorite book. After that comes Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. Phenomenal book. And, from reading the book, you get to see what was a huge issue. Some people take issue with this. Some people like it. Well, Booker T. Washington has been, he was, to some degree, was maybe controversial, not controversial, but just an individual that some people were just either liked his approach or they didn't, right? But basically, the general stance that he would take on things, at least as history tells it, and as his book would make you believe, is that he was about compromising. Booker T. Washington, I shouldn't say compromising like giving up, but compromising and perhaps a more diplomatic fashion to move forward, crossing the aisles, talking to the other side, seeing how everybody could benefit, with the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that, in part, may have been missing in our efforts over all these years. That's not to say that people don't try, but perhaps that divide was harder to cross. Now I think it's a little bit easier to cross, right? So now I think it's easier to be more diplomatic with the leaders. It's easier to get into the C-suite and say, hey, look, we need this, we need that, here's what's going on, all those things. I think that's what's been missing. I think in order for us to see change happen in healthcare as it pertains to diversity, the stakeholders we have to get buy-in, right? They've got to believe in what we're doing. They have to believe in what we're saying. They have to understand the value, the benefits. And in order to get buy-in, that means you have to understand what's going on. You have to understand the problem. You have to have solutions, things you can provide to them. So you can't just go saying, hey, we need this. You have to be able to talk your language. You have to be able to communicate, etc. And those things matter. And that's the argument that I make in the book as well. So fast forward into the next section in this chapter is defining equity. Defining equity. This is really important because when you talk about equity, a lot of people will confuse equity for the way that we use the word equality, right? So equal means everybody's getting the same. Equal is everybody's getting the same. Equity is people get what they need, right? To be able to survive, thrive, compete, whatever. People get what they need. So whereas equality is you get $5, you get $5, you get $5. Equity is, hey, you get $5, but I see this guy over here, he needs more than you do, so I'm going to give him $8. Oh, and this person out here, they need even more than that, so I'm going to give them $14, right? So everybody's not getting equal, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to give people what they need so that they can get to what you're trying to get to. I am fully aware that some people take issue with this, and we'll get into this here in a second. But I'm fully aware some people take issue with this, say, well, why should he get 5 and then somebody else gets more? How is that fair? I'm not saying it's fair, and we'll dive into that here in a second. But there's a greater good in that, I believe. Actually, that is the next section in the chapter. So the next section is the unfairness of equity. So the unfairness of equity. People will say, hey, if I work for what I have, why should I have to, give somebody else, or why should they get more than I get? And I would kind of agree with that. I would agree with that to a certain extent. I'm not saying that it's fair. I'm not saying that they necessarily have to get more, they deserve more. That's not what the argument is, right? Some people might make the argument, but that's not the argument that I'm making here in this book. What I am saying is that there is a greater level of societal realization. Societal realization that we can get to. That might not even be based completely on fairness, but more so based on love. Based on love. This idea that, hey, you know what? I see that you got five, you got five, you got five, but man, you're hurting. And that five is not going to cut it for you. So let's give you 10. Right? That's equity. And that's hard to buy. So from the outside looking, if you don't spend much time thinking about this, that might be a hard pill to swallow. Say, like why do I care about them? That's why I say it's got to be a thing of love. It's got to be a place coming from a place of love. It's got to be coming from understanding. And I get it. Some people, I don't get into critical race theory at all. That's not my thing. That's not my calling. So by no means am I acting like I'm an expert on that. But I know some people will take issue with critical race theory and make the statement, things like, hey, there's no backing to say things need to be equitable, right? I've heard people even use biblical claims to say the Bible doesn't talk about equitable. So yeah, but the Bible talks about love, right? And this is just my personal belief. Perhaps we can't force people to be equitable, but people can volunteer to be equitable. People can put out love to be equitable. We talk about it like it's a negative thing. That's my issue with it. People talk about equity. Oh, it's negative. You're getting more. They're getting more. Why are we talking about it like it's a negative thing rather than talking about it from a perspective of, hey, that could be a thing of volunteerism. That could be a thing of love, right? Well, what's wrong with giving somebody more when they need it? How are you going to tell me that's wrong? How are you going to tell me that's wrong? And that's the issue I take with that. I see people criticizing that idea rather than thinking, okay, well, how can we achieve this? Because it is a good thing to help people. How can we achieve this instead of criticizing, oh, it's horrible, da, 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 da. Why criticize it? Okay, maybe you don't want it to be policy, right? Maybe you don't want it to be law, okay? That's fine. But nonetheless, when we're out in platforms, public platforms, speaking about equity, perhaps there is some unfairness to it on a surface level. Yeah, perhaps there's unfairness to equity. Okay, well, I can't argue against that. You get 10, he gets 5. This person who got 5, they're going to say that's not fair. I got 5. I get that. But I'm not arguing about the fairness of equity. I'm arguing about love.
Here's what I found.
Siri. I'm arguing about love. I'm arguing about giving people what they need to make it. Giving people what they need to be able to take care of themselves, to be able to take care of their children, right? Here's the example I use of equity in the book to help you understand. I talk about the NBA, and it's throughout sports, but I talk about the NBA specifically, the NBA lottery. So those of you who might not be as familiar, here's how it works. So you go through an NBA season. Some teams do really good, some teams don't do as well. The teams that don't do as well, typically what happens is they often get the first picks in the draft for the next season. How does that happen? It happens through this mechanism called the lottery. So the lottery, and I'm just going to give you a made-up, very simplified version. It's like a lottery, it's like raffles. You put the thing in there, you spin it, you pull out the ball, essentially, right? So it's like that. So here's a very simple, basic, made-up example. Let's say you have 10 balls in there for the lottery, and essentially you're picking, the first pick, they get the number 1 pick in the draft. The second ball you draw, that team gets the number 2 pick. The third ball you draw, that team gets the number 3 pick, right? That's generally how it works. So you have all these balls, and let's say you got 10 balls. Let's say, I'll use the San Antonio Spurs as an example. Let's say San Antonio Spurs had a really horrible season. They get 5 balls in there. Out of the 10, 5 of those balls are going to say San Antonio Spurs on it. And the Rockets might have not done as well that season, so the Rockets are going to get 3 balls in there. And maybe the Mavs didn't do as well, so the Mavs are going to get 2 balls in there, right? And those are your 10 balls. When you put your hand in there and draw out, there's a 50% chance that you're going to pick the Spurs, right? They have more balls, more opportunity. You made the situation a little bit more equitable for them. You gave them a favor, essentially. You gave them a hand up, a leg up, whatever you want to call it, right? And that's how this thing works in the NBA lottery. But why is that important? So you pull that ball out, the Spurs get the number 1 draft pick. They get a pick 7 foot, however tall this player, Victor Wembanyama, is, right? That's what happens this past season. They picked Victor Wembanyama, supposed to be a complete game changer. Now that can change your whole franchise. That can take them from being the worst team in the league to one of the better teams in the league. Somebody might say, well, that's not fair. Why did they get that pick? Why did they get him? Here's why. Because if that team keeps doing poorly, if that team's not winning any games or doing horrible, fans stop coming, people stop buying their merchandise, right? The broadcast on television, all that stuff stops. That team is at risk of failing in the market, right? That business, that business is at risk of failing. And that business fails, that's not just a problem for the San Antonio Spurs organization, that's a problem for the NBA as a whole. And that's a problem for the NBA association as a whole, that becomes a problem for every other team in the NBA. You understand, right? So in order to make sure the NBA as an entity as a whole thrives, they need to make sure that these teams are doing well. They need to make sure that all the teams have a shot. So what do? They utilize the equity as a tool to ensure that everybody rises up. And that's how I believe we need to approach this for the United States of America and the world in general, really, but specifically the United States of America. If we start having bodies, segments within the population that aren't doing very well, that are failing, that are struggling, right? That's not just going to impact just them. That's going to impact this group and that group and that group and this group. And eventually that becomes a problem for all of society. However, if you can get the rising tide to lift all boats, that benefits everybody. And that's the perspective. That's why equity is important, right? That NBA example to me is such a good example. That's why equity is important. You have to look and say, okay, I get it. We might need to give this group more because this group is struggling. And if this group struggles, it's going to impact this group. And if that group struggles, it's going to impact this group, then the whole nation is in trouble, right? So that's why equity is important. That's one part. So it just makes sense logically to help those in need because of that reason, because ultimately it's going to impact other people. But then the second part goes back to what I've been harping on. Just love. Say, wow, you're struggling, you're hurting. What can I do to help? Right? And that's equity. Well, yeah, I didn't give this young lady help, but I'm looking at you and you need it. So what's wrong with me giving it to you if I'm able to give it to you? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about equity. And yeah, some people might argue that it's unfair. It is what it is. But end of the day, there's a higher realization, I believe, than fairness. And that's love, right? Love. All right, and then the last section in this chapter is aiming for excellence, right? And then, again, goes back to the title of the chapter, achieving excellence, not just equity. A lot of people will think, when people are talking about diversity, what you're really trying to do is just focus on getting rid of disparities. Sure, that's part of it. And I wouldn't even say getting rid of disparities, because disparities means things are disparate, right? So, you could get rid of disparities and just have everybody doing horrible, right? So it's not just getting rid of disparities. What you want to do is we don't want to bring groups down. You want to bring everybody up. So it's not just getting rid of disparities. But yeah, that might be part of it, right? Diversity hopefully will help with some disparities. That's important. However, when I'm talking about increasing diversity in healthcare, when the people I know, people who mentor and people who do this type of work with me, when they're talking about increasing diversity in healthcare, what we're talking about is moving healthcare towards a place of greater excellence. Moving healthcare towards a place of greater excellence. That's what we're really talking about here. And we'll get into this in chapter 3, but we know so many great positive things that come along with diversity, increased diversity. We know it. So why are we not utilizing it as a tool? Why aren't we, employing these things and setting them out there and spreading them through our healthcare system to see them start working and yield fruit, right? So when we're talking about diversity, it's not just about giving people opportunity, right? It's not just about getting rid of disparities, these things are important. There is a greater meaning to our efforts, and that's excellence across the system, right? We'll see it with innovations in research, right? Perspectives and decision making, right? All sorts of things. We'll see that in the next chapter. But those things move healthcare forward in general. When healthcare in general moves forward, what do you think happens to the rest of society? To other sectors, right? They move forward too, because you need healthy people to go to work. So that's what we're doing for. That's why we're doing this. When we're talking about increasing diversity in the field of medicine, we're talking about moving healthcare towards a more excellent state. That's what we're talking about. All right, so that's a quick summary of chapter 2 of the book. Again, the summaries are cool, but the meat is actually in here. There's a lot of great stuff in here that I really hope you guys take a moment to read. And, if you read it, let me know. I've been having this phenomenal. So the dean of my medical school, he got his copy and he's reading it and he's been emailing me. And it's amazing just seeing his thought process, seeing somebody who ran, multi-million-dollar Institute and just seeing his thought process in terms of, how, like, what does he think about what I said? How does he approach it? What are his angles? What are his perspectives? It's just amazing. And that's really what I want. I want this book to get in the hands of leaders. So, grab a copy, give it to the president of your hospital, right? Give it to your dean, give it to your chairman, get it in the hands of leaders, because the content in this book is impactful, it's important, and I believe that every leader in healthcare should understand the things that I talk about in this book, right? I believe if you're at the helm, I believe you should understand the things that I'm talking about in this book. And I believe that it will help you. If you're at the helm, it will help you in your decision making as it pertains to things of diversity. It'll give you greater perspective as it pertains to diversity. So please do grab a copy of the book, whether you're a leader or not. If you're not a leader, grab a copy for your leaders, right? Maybe give it to them as a gift or something. But the information in this book is a game changer for our system. Right, so that's chapter 2. Chapter 3 is called The Benefits of a More Diverse Workforce. Benefits of a More Diverse Workforce. Some great stuff in that chapter, which we'll talk about next time. Grab a copy, Amazon.com. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting. Love you guys.